I'm Ian Spiers. I'm a terminology education specialist. So my principal role is to look after the authoring education courses. We have two, authoring level 1 and authoring level 2, which teach people how to be using the authoring tool. So that's generally my role. Today, I'm just going to talk to you about the concept request service and give you a brief overview. And I'll touch on the authoring platform, but I have a YouTube video that I can send you a link to, which demos the authoring tool. So we won't cover that today, but I can give you a link. So the content request service is often known as CRS, which is a platform that allows a national release center to request changes to SNOMED international content. And I suppose as part of becoming an NRC, you might want to consider a similar type of process for you having your national request to make changes either to your extension, or if someone within your country finds something that they would like to be changed in SNOMED International, they would go through you. So the content request service is a tool, and there's a link here to the tool. It's best to use in Google Chrome. It's a web-based platform. The ability to add requests is limited to name individuals. So you would nominate individuals that would do the content requests within the platform, and those named individuals would be stated by the National Release Center. Excuse me. There are other individuals that can request content. So if they're part of an international group, say for example a advisory group, or if there's a specific project or done by a vendor, then maybe they would get specific access. But generally it comes through the national release centers. So rather than us having in SNOMED International the whole of the international community sending requests to us, the requests come to the National Release Center, and then the National Release Center submit those requests to SNOMED International. There is some key documentation here. I can show you. I think Rory went on one of the sites. So on our web page, there is a section called Change or Add to SNOMED CT, and that's the link there, and you'll get it on the presentation. And it talks about the content request service, and there are links to further information. And there is within Confluence itself a user guide and video about how to use the platform, and a document that outlines how to make requests, and generally useful information about how to use the CRS. So there are two main places for documentation. And as I say, there's an introductory video and a guide as well to making requests. So there are three types of requests. Generally, when you're first starting, you're just doing a simple input mode. The direct mode requires, and I'll show you a screenshot later on of direct mode, but it involves you having some authoring experience to be able to use that mode. And there's also a batch input mode. So if you had a number of similar type requests that you wanted to put in a batch, then it's up. You download a spreadsheet from the content request service, and you populate that, and then that's uploaded and validated. So you can do bigger batch requests if required. So how requests are prioritized? Well, generally they're treated with normal priority when they come in. Obviously, if there's some sort of data error that might lead to some clinical risk, then that would be dealt with more rapidly than any other priority, just for clinical safety reasons. There is a service level agreement set between SNOMED International and those within the NRCs. So because we have 42 member countries now, we do, for fairness, have a certain limit to how many requests of change or additions can be made to SNOMED International by one member country within a 6-month period. I think where there is a requirement to do a large project, then that would more likely be discussed with your customer relation managers, so Liara, in terms of prioritization. So if it was a huge change, or say, for example, you were looking at a specific area and there was a lot of change to be happened, then that might be done through a batch submission. And you would consult with people like Liara to get that prioritized. But in the general maintenance of the requests, it's usually around sort of 150 additions or changes per 6-month period of the same type of content. So, you know, that could be disorder, and then another 150 for procedures. So we try and manage people's expectations, but also we do have, as I say, a lot of requests from different countries, and so we have to manage expectations. In terms of what type of content requests can be made, the requests are to add, modify, or inactivate concepts within SNOMED CT. So there's a range here. I won't go through everything, but you'll get this presentation, so hopefully you can go through it in more detail. But obviously you can modify descriptions and relationships, inactivate concepts, descriptions and relationships, and request new content. So these are all, this is all to do with SNOMED International content itself. So if you find that you have any issues with the content, you can submit a request, and it would be looked at by a terminologist within SNOMED International. So the platform itself is quite a user-friendly platform. You can do searches on different requests. And one thing that often you might do before submitting a request is having a look at any historical requests to see whether anybody has ever requested a change in the past or is undergoing a request for that change. So you can see what type of requests have happened, but also see whether there is currently someone else requesting such a change. So you, as I say, you can search on requests. You can look at requests made by other individuals and historical requests, and you can also create a new request within the platform. So just some key ideas in terms of the fundamentals of this. When you're making a request, it's always worth checking whether that, if you're trying to get content added, is to check the international and the daily build browser to check whether that content already exists. It's also worth looking, when it comes to content, looking at the editorial guides. So SNOMED International publish a editorial guide for every 6-month release, so any changes are updated within there. And it's worth looking at certain things in there in terms of what would be in international scope and how modeling of the concepts is generally done. One key thing is when you make a request, the idea is to have clear justification for why you would want that extra content in. We've learned from past terminologies that just requesting for something that doesn't exist in SNOMED isn't always helpful if it's never going to be used in the wider context. So having a clear justification helps SNOMED international terminologists to understand why the content's required and how it would be used. And again, it has to be internationally applicable. So it's not just country specific, but it would be something that could be used by other countries as well. So a justification that it doesn't exist within SNOMED would not be ideal. You would really want a true justification of something, and to back that up, you would often provide a reference, so peer-reviewed, say for example on PubMed or something like that. Obviously nothing from like patient websites or Wikipedia. We would want something official to prove and give details about and information about the concept you're requesting. So if it was on a specific new disorder or a procedure, then we'd want evidence that that existed, and that's also provided. So just to give you an idea, when you go into the tool and make a new request, and this is just a simple request, you get this drop down to choose the type of request you're asking for. And then basically you get this page that comes up, and you fill in the red elements are the mandatory elements within the request. And as I say, don't be, there's videos on this, and you can look at past requests, so you can sort of learn how this has been done. But I've just given you an overview of some information of what these fields are. If you had an extension, a local code, and you wanted that to be promoted to SNOMED International, then you can provide that code, so that concept code is retained rather than being changed once it goes up to SNOMED International. And then you have fields like what member country you are, what type of topic it is, a summary, so exactly what you want, what is required of the request. So do you want addition of a concept, or do you want to change to a concept? As I say, some clear justification, some reference, and then there's some information that gives people guidance, which generally comes from having a bit more knowledge about authoring, but having some idea where this new concept, if you're requesting a new concept, where that would sit within SNOMED. So you would give an idea of maybe a parent concept, the sort of FSN, so what type of FSN you would require, and also the semantic tag, so whether it's a disorder, clinical finding, procedure, and then a preferred term, which is the most clinically useful name. And a lot of information can be got from the editorial guidelines, but when you first start, if you request something that doesn't fulfill the naming conventions within the editorial guide, then terminologists will speak to you and maybe adjust the naming to fit with it, align within that editorial guide, and give you feedback. So the as I say, there is a bit of a more advanced type method, which is called the direct request, and this sort of is allowing people to actually put in the descriptions and the is a relationship, so the parent, the proximal primitive parent. But in truth, don't worry so much about that. Once you've got authors that have more experience within authoring, that's something that you could consider doing. But the standard request fulfills most people's requirements anyway. And as I say, there's that ability to do batch requests as well. In terms of the status, so when you put a request in, it's managed by SNOMED International, and they will keep you, they would put various statuses on your request, so you know at what stage your request is for example, if they wanted clarification, they would put clarification needed and send you an email to say that further information was required. So there are a number of statuses, and eventually, if your request is agreed to, then they will give you the concept ID and they will tell you what the fully specified name and preferred term is for the concept. So it follows the sort of standard process for any sort of request status. And again, we do have the links on this slide will go to certain presentations we have. They're less specific about using the CRS, but more about the key principles you need to think about in terms of making a request and also managing a request. And then finally, just to give you an idea of the authoring platform, so SNOMED International and a number of managed services use our tool, but those that create an extension would have to have a similar tool. And in there, just to give you an idea of the authoring process, there are three fundamental thoughts you have to, when creating a concept. First, you have to do your preparation, so research and fully understand what the meaning of the concept is. Then you have to develop what sort of hierarchy you're going to put it in and what descriptions you're going to have and things like case sensitivity. And then you have to consider how that would be modeled within SNOMED CT, what sort of parents it would have, what relationship groups, and what its definition and status is. And obviously, we classify concepts and there's a certain amount of review. So just to give you an idea, the authoring platform is a web-based application. Again, it's used by SNOMED International and other NRCs that are on the managed service. And the content is updated to the latest version of SNOMED. I'm not going to go into a demo, but I'll send you a link that goes through these key things about the dashboard, being able to search, add content, and classify. And just to finally say that we have 2 education courses and certifications, one on authoring level 1, which is the starting point in terms of understanding authoring, which is about 90 hours of online learning over 5 months that start at March and September. We're now fully booked up for March, but the September one is filling up now. And there is a certification element to that as well. So once you've done the course, you could then take an exam and be certified at that level. And we've just started authoring level 2, which is a lot more advanced, a lot more time required. And again, there's a course and a certification. And you can find out about our courses at snomed.org courses. So that's it. As I say, I will put in a link, if I can grab it now, and into the chat for the authoring demo, so you can have a look at that. That's on YouTube and gives you an idea of the authoring platform.